Hi, we're here with Bert Hochfeld, former hedge fund manager. Bert, I wanted to know your opinions on insider information. We all know that pure insider information is illegal. Like, if we're going to buy a company tomorrow and we tell someone and they trade on it, that's really illegal. But is it used? Is there a gray line? What's going on? Do you even have to try to get inside information? What's going on these days with that?
Since the start of this decade and the prosecutions of Preet Bharara, hedge funds are extremely cautious, almost more cautious than you can imagine about anything that smacks of them having an informational advantage. If you try to tell them information that they don't feel is in the public domain, they'll cut you off, because there is nothing that's worth what many hedge funds went through, being prosecuted or persecuted, if you prefer, by Preet Bharara, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. I'm not going to comment on what I think about those prosecutions because it doesn't really matter. They happened. Eventually, the Second Circuit overruled a significant line of prosecution. But even after that, hedge funds don't want, how shall I put it? They don't want the source. They don't want that kind of pleasure, as I would say. It's just not worth it. 10 years ago, everybody wanted an informational advantage. If you remember, I talked about Stevie Cohn and
SAC Capital, one of the biggest hedge funds ever, right? Steve Cohn.
And I talked to you about Whole Foods Market.
Yeah. One of Steve Cohen's calls.
According to the Wall Street Journal, who did an analysis of this, SAC traded Whole Foods Market 25 or 30 times before they released same-store sales. And Cohen's record, or SAC's record, on those trades was something like 85%. Now, you may believe in fairy tales and Mother Goose, and I believe that the most likely explanation is informational advantage. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. But hedge funds, when I was a professional analyst, would always ask me for information I wasn't supposed to have. That was the sine qua non of how analysts got paid. They don't do it today. They don't do it because A, several of them wound up in jail, and even if they didn't wind up in jail, they were subject to a proctological exam without anesthesia. Very, very unpleasant. So today, a hedge fund does not, cannot, will not trade on information. I have seen hedge funds tell me, Christ, you have given us informational advantage and now I can't trade. They can't trade. They're scared. They all have compliance directors. The compliance directors are king of the hill, and the compliance directors will say, if you have gotten informational advantage, you may not trade on it, even if you think that you could have gotten the same information without, or reached the same conclusion without informational advantage.
All right, so how are hedge funds trying to get an advantage without that's something that's already in the public? Are they looking at information differently than others? Is there methods of finding out what's going on without someone in a company explicitly saying it?
They can talk to authorized company representatives. They can talk to the CFO. So can you. So can you. If you want to call up and say, I want to talk to the CFO or the director of IR, you're going to get, that's going to they're going to make it happen for you. It might not take an hour, but it'll take a day or 2 days, okay? So I think it's important to understand that you can get companies. The concept of body language comes in a lot, okay? Most companies, especially if they have good news to tell you, are not going to hide it under a bushel basket. They won't tell you specifically, but to paraphrase our current president, they'll say words like, what do you think? Or how do you think that's going to work out? And it's up to you to fill in the blanks. If you've been doing this a long time, okay, and it's what you want to do, you're going to say, I understand what he was trying to tell me. He didn't say we're having a great quarter. A few weeks ago, I talked to the head of North American sales at Twilio.
Twilio provides messaging for things like Facebook, Uber, and thousands of companies that have apps and mobile, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Twilio stock got crushed.
From like 60 to around 24, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because Uber's divorcing them. And because WhatsApp is no longer a 17% customer. So that's happened already. Okay? I mean, this quarter we're currently in was the high point for Uber and for WhatsApp. If we look, the rest of their business is growing at 65%.
That's pretty fast.
I said to the CFO, I said, we're basically at or near the point where your revenues peaked from WhatsApp and Uber. And they're not disappearing according to you, they're leveling out at 4 or 5% of revenue. Why then is the consensus for 2018 at 20+% growth? He almost answered the question. He came very close. He said, I can't answer that question. But then he said, finally, what do you think? What do you think he was trying to tell me?
He was trying to say the analysts are wrong, and it's up to you to take advantage of our stock price at the moment, right?
Yeah, I thought that's what he was trying to tell me, okay? So did the other people who were on the call with me think he was trying to tell me that. All of you who are listening can do that. It's not, the guy at Twilio doesn't know where I live and that I'm fat and old or anything. He just knows that I'm interested in the company and I've done a pretty fair amount of homework so I can have, as he told me, we're having an intelligent conversation. if you are careful enough to study the company, study their apps and so forth, feed that in, you'd be amazed at what that does to
The
your
level of conversation that you had
Yeah,
with the investor relations representative.
yeah, you'd be amazed how that changes. I mean, most guys call them up and say, how are you going to do this quarter? That they do. I mean, they don't try to understand the app. Excuse me. They don't try to understand competition. Don't try to understand anything. How are you going to do this quarter?
Oh, so if you ask about the quarter, that's kind of like something he's not allowed to tell you. But if you ask about, what about your competition, and they say, oh, well, they're pulling out of the market, I mean, he's allowed to say that. That's not illegal, and you can deduct any you can make a decision from that alone. You don't need to ask what are your numbers going to be, and hopefully let the guy slip out some illegal information. Yeah.
If you want to have productive intercourse with the company, study what they do and how they do it, and you'd be amazed at what these guys might tell you.
All right.
Amazed.
Thanks, Bert. Appreciate it.